All right, now that Patrick has connected to the audio, let's go ahead and start. If more people trickle in and come in late, that's totally fine too. But thank you all for coming. This is a collaboration between Open Dialogue and Relyfe. So I'll introduce Open Dialogue really briefly for anyone who's not familiar. Open Dialogue is an organization and a platform that started at UC San Diego, but we've branched out and we're doing so much more. We host weekly Sunday discussions, 2 p.m. Every first Sunday of the month, we have an identity dialogue where we bring in panelists or guest speakers to speak about their background, their identity of some sort. Today's our identity dialogue for September. It's about LGBT plus acceptance. And that is Open Dialogue for y'all. Most of y'all I recognize, but that's a little brief explanation of us. If you're interested in checking us out in the future, again, we have weekly events every Sunday at 2 p.m. PST.
Sweet. Hi, everyone. My name is Ankur. I'm going to be co-panel hosting this event with Vanessa. I am a leader of an organization called Relyfe. We are a student startup / student organization that started about 2 years ago. And we had doing something similar to Open Dialogue, where we provided a platform for people to share their stories and be vulnerable. And we did this through video interviews of students across UCSD, of them just sharing a personal struggle or challenge that they went through in their lives, and also talking about what steps they took to get help or overcome the challenge, and what advice they would have to share to others going through something similar. I basically got connected to Open Dialogue through their founders, Ahabia. We were close friends, and I always thought that our organizations were pretty similarly aligned or had similar mission values. And so I'm super excited, and the organization of Relyfe super excited to be collaborating on this event. So yeah, we can get started about, sorry, something in my throat.
You're good.
Vanessa, take over.
We'll let Ankur cough it out. So we'll go over some guidelines really quickly. Usually Open Dialogue has these open discussions with more defined guidelines to keep a respectful discussion. Since today is an identity dialogue where we have panelists come and speak about their own experiences, we're not going to be doing too much group discussion per se, maybe at the very end, a very informal discussion. But just to keep in mind throughout this entire event for the panelist Q&A and the informal discussion if you're staying afterwards, the number one rule is to be respectful of one another. To keep that in mind, if you're not comfortable using your voice, you can feel free to use the chat box. Later, we'll be having a live Q&A where you can just unmute yourself and ask questions or type them in the chat. You can feel free to direct your message to one of the panelists if you want to ask them personally, or you can send it to me or Ankur and then we'll read it out for you. So just be respectful, and we are super grateful that we have 3 panelists today, but they're not obligated to answer all the questions. So if there's any question out there that panelists do not want to answer, please respect that and understand their decision. But otherwise, I think we can go ahead and get started. Let's first do introductions. We did post about our panelists on Instagram, and it's on Open Dialogue's website, but for everyone else, we'd love to learn more about y'all. So can every panelist please briefly introduce yourself and why you're here?
We can start with Gina.
Oh, okay. I was going to let somebody else go first. My name is Gina Roberts. I live in North County. I actually graduated from UCSD in 1977. So I'm a little bit older than the rest of you. I've lived in San Diego 90% of my life. I've worked in the aerospace industry, which isn't here anymore, and I'm here because Jimmy Farr asked me to join you guys, and I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Awesome. And I guess we can go to Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe. I identify as gay, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm here partly because Encore actually asked me to. I was a part of Relyfe a few years ago when we were first starting, and I just wanted to, um, you know, have a give back to them, and they're a really amazing organization, and I'm glad to be here, talking with you all and sharing my story, and hopefully, maybe get some inspiration or motivation for someone out there who needs to hear the story.
Thanks, Joe. And finally, our third panelist is Jay.
Hey everyone. I'm actually a part of Open Dialogue, so you've probably seen me at previous discussions. I'm finally doxing my voice. Here I am. I am non-binary, pan, and I actually fall on the gray arrow A spectrum as well. So that's my relationship with the LGBT community. And I'm really glad to be here. Excited to answer questions that you submitted and any you might have afterwards.
Thank you. That's our three panelists for today. We do have some questions that were submitted via Google Form, so we're going to go ahead and start with that, and Ankur can take it away.
Awesome. So our first question is, what was life like for you before you came out? What was it like to, on a day-to-day basis, to feel like you weren't living in your own shoes? And we can start with whoever.
Let somebody else start first. Come on, Joe.
All right. Yeah, I guess I'll start. Well, I mean, actually, the life I led before I came out was not incredibly long. I came out junior year in high school, so there was not really a whole lot of time there. It was a lot of questioning, a lot of trying to figure out exactly who I was, what this sort of difference in my life was, and trying to kind of pinpoint it and be like, okay, this is, am I bisexual, am I gay, I don't know. And a lot of it was questioning and hating myself quite a bit, because my parents were pretty conservative and they didn't like the LGBT community, and that kind of rubbed off on me, and I think it took me longer than it would have if I lived in a more supporting household. So there was quite a bit dealing with that.
Great. Jay, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'm down. My coming out process was actually very messy, and it happened over the course of several years. There were some parts of me that I guess I was quicker to accept. So definitely something like being pan was something I understood from a very young age. I think I was in middle school and I realized boys are kind of stinky, but I like them, and girls are cute and I like them too. And people who are neither of them are also really cute. So here we are. The Arrow Ace stuff was a lot messier, in part because I had no idea that's what I was and I didn't have a name for it, and it was a lot harder for me to, I guess, understand that that's what I was and that's what I am. And the non-binary stuff was definitely the hardest. I was assigned female at birth, and I identified with those pronouns for probably until I graduated high school. I went out of state to start school, so I was going to school in Cleveland actually for a while, and that's where I started using non-binary pronouns or gender-neutral pronouns, and I found that that's what I was most comfortable with. But I had a health crisis while I was there, so I took a fly back home, and I went back to using female pronouns because I could not safely come out to my parents at the time. So that was that for maybe 2 years, and then I transferred to UCSD actually last year, and started using non-binary pronouns again at school when I wasn't at home, and I could be a little more discreet about it, so my parents didn't know. I actually found a family at Open Dialogue like right around then, and they were super accepting of me, and that really helped me feel more comfortable with who I am and realizing that's who I am. And after that, I had to come out to my parents over the course of like several months and gradually getting them to accept. And they still haven't gotten there, but here's hoping. Life was, I like to say that I'm more comfortable with myself than I've ever been, but I'm also at an overall low point in my life right now. So we're kind of just juggling a lot of things right now. But that's how it is.
Thank you, Jay. And Gina, we'll finish with you on that question.
Okay, well, I spent a good deal of my life, you know, from the age 7, I knew there was something distinctly different with how I interacted with people. I looked at myself in the mirror and said, yeah, I'm this big, monstrous, humongous person. I feel like I should be a different person than this. And so in 1960, when I kind of made that decision, it was not a conversation you could have with your parents, which is something which I'm very grateful is possible now. So I basically just went into stealth mode and tried to figure it out. I actually started cross-dressing as early as age 7 or 8. I literally stay home from elementary school and cross-dress and then go to school in the afternoon when the classes that I liked were. You know, went to UCSD, got out in 1977. The whole time my parents bought a condo out there so I could live in it and rent it out to other people. So whenever I was there by myself, I basically would cross-dress and you know, I did everything I could to keep from getting roommates to move in, including taking extra jobs so I could make the money to make the rent or the house payment. It just, you know, it was just always a struggle. Like I was saying a little earlier as my pre-warm is I spent my entire life trying to prove to the world I was somebody I wasn't. Now the good news is that made me strive to be very successful. I had a very strong personality. I had a very strong desire to succeed, and I just wanted to make the best of what I had going. It's truly easy to understand how people in the transgender world could consider that suicide was possibly their best option. I fortunately didn't go through that phase because my personality was just stronger, but it's tough to wake up every morning and look at yourself in the mirror and go, this isn't who I am. And so finally, at age 57, I came out to my family, and response was 90% good. My wife wasn't thrilled, and in fact, we're separated because of it, but we're still good friends. And it's interesting that there's a lot of commonality between my story and especially going from one binary to another, that people act a lot of the same way. They, you know, do very hazardous, you know, I can't tell you how many transgender male to female I know that were SEALs, Green Berets, took on very risky jobs just to try to prove to the world how totally masculine they were. And I had a lot of female to male friends that are exactly the opposite. They tried everything they could to be the most feminine females they could. So then they went into kind of a tomboy mode, and then they said, screw it, I'm going to be who I am. So right now, with the exception of being separated from my spouse, who I love dearly and still do, my life's great. I'm active in all sorts of different things. I've retired from my own business that I had, and engaged in politics and working in the community and a lot of other things. So.
Great, thank you so much.
Call me, and I'm sorry.
Thank you all for sharing. We're going to keep going down the list of questions that was submitted via Google form, but if y'all have follow-up questions, if you have new questions, we'll get to them towards the end of our Zoom call. So some of y'all already did answer this, but if anyone would like to further elaborate on this question, feel free to. If you feel like you've answered it enough, you don't have to answer it again. This question is, what was the process of coming out for you? And if you feel like you've already answered it, you don't have to.
I can elaborate a little bit. In the transgender world, there's kind of the spectrum, you know, that we talk about different places you are in the transgender spectrum. And I give a lot of presentations about it. You know, it kind of has the part-timers and then the, you know, kind of in the middle, and then the transsexuals and things like that. And a lot of people like me just kind of work their way across the spectrum trying to find out where they fit. And for me, I finally found out that I fitted where I should be, and that's me. And so coming out was interesting. I like I said, I had about 95% acceptance. The only people that I had issues with were my, I had an H1 Hummer group that I had put together called the H1 Psycho Squad in Southern California. And I was the leader, and those guys had a problem with it because I was the supposedly testosterone driven leader. So about half of them were, yeah, this really sucks, we don't appreciate you anymore. And the other half were, what could be more psycho than a transgender, you know, leader of a Hummer group? So that was tough. Some of those people I was very close to. My family was awesome. I have 3 kids, and they were all, you know, pretty darn accepting. And my dad, on the other hand, my mom died many years ago. My stepmother is pretty good. My dad kind of went through a "how dare you" kind of thing, and it's weird because part of my story is I had some issues at birth that my dad never knew about. So I'll pass to the next person.
Well, as I mentioned, I came out 7 years ago today. That was to one person. That was my my Spanish teacher in high school. And over the course of a few months, I you know, came out to more and more people. And my parents had a very hard time with it when they eventually found out a couple months later. And it took a course of a few years for my mom to get around, and she you know, she actually finally accepted it. My dad is, he seems to be still in limbo. I mean, he there are signs of him getting better with it, just like silent signs. Like he got me this little rainbow thing for my car, and that was sweet. I think it was kind of like this silent acceptance. It was this little peace sign that looks like a rainbow, and it's on a car mat. I thought that was, you know, kind of like a silent sign. So, you know, things have gotten better the last 7 years as far as my parents go. Things were pretty great with my friends and everything, though, like right from the get-go. I have some pretty amazing friends. It's really important to find that support system.
If I follow up, Joe, how did you find the courage to come out to your Spanish teacher, just to like, you know, put it out there in the world?
That was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I actually, because what happened was I kind of came out to myself first, and then once I did that, I was like, okay, now I need to get it out there. And my Spanish teacher was probably the most. I knew how she'd react. Like, you know, there was I can get vibes from people, and she just seemed like she was just very warm and welcoming, and, you know, she wouldn't disparage anyone. And so I made a point to come out to her on like one Friday. This is Friday, December 6th of 2013, and she could tell something was wrong, and I was like internally debating, should I even tell her? I'm gonna tell her after lunch. I'm gonna tell her after school. And then of course I was kind of pushing it off, and finally at lunch, she like kind of pulled me aside, because I was in her classroom every day at lunch, and she pulled me aside. She's like, hey, there's something wrong. You need to tell me what it is. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And I told her, and again, just very accepting, very, very welcoming. And it's important, again, to find that kind of support.
I feel like I kind of touched base with this question already. The question of the process of coming out. Like Joe said, it's super important to have a support system who you know you can rely on. The first person I came out to was my best friend Alex, who also is trans, and he was definitely probably one of the biggest people who like helped me feel safe, um, helped me feel okay with being myself and trying to come out. Um, I'm also like gradually in the process of chipping away at my parents. I think it's mostly a matter of like a general generational difference for me. They are South Korean, so totally different culture. They're a lot older than I am, so totally different like generational gap. But I do think that even if they can't be understanding of me and they're still misgendering me all the time and they don't really try to correct themselves, I do think that it's from a lack of understanding more than it is a lack of love. So definitely like giving people space to understand you and giving yourself a chance to understand yourself. Like Joe said, it's super important to try to come out to yourself and accept yourself before you try to find that kind of acceptance from someone else.
Yeah, I love that. Great, thank you. So our third question here is, and it's kind of been mentioned a little bit in previous responses, but who has or has most disapproving when coming out or telling people who you are? And how were you able to overcome this, or how did you handle that for people who were, you know, kind of repulsed by who you were?
Well, I'll start because I kind of touched on it with my Hummer group and a couple other people. But um, it really, first of all, it really kind of annoyed me. It was weird because I live in a little tiny conservative town up in North County, and I actually came out to my Kiwanis group first, and mainly because it was the only group of adults that I dealt with in town all the time. And a lot of people tell transgender people, if you're going to come out, you need to move, you need to go away, you need to start over again. And I was like, yeah, I've lived here for 25 years. I would rather give people the opportunity of dealing with it. And you talk about being misgendered. I still have friends that I've known for 30 years who blow it every single time we see each other, and then they freak out. They go, "Oh no, sorry, I did that." And but it's just, it's kind of a way of uh, people are taught to be inherently polite, and if they screw up being inherently polite as opposed to being malicious, I deal with it pretty well. But people that are, I mean, I really haven't had anybody really get in my face except one time, and it was in a very interesting situation that I was able to resolve quite positively because of my shooting skill. And the guy, I completely smoked this guy, and he's, after he started cussing at me for being with them damn transgender people and da 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 da, and I said, okay, I'm just, let's have a contest. And he asked me if he could go to lunch, and I spent an hour and a half talking to him at lunch, and he said I changed his life, and that's kind of been my experience. That, and we'll talk a little bit about it when I get into the conservative politics thing. Is a lot of people just haven't had the experience of meeting transgender and LGBT people, and they've been trained through their lives that we're basically horrid unicorn, freakazoids, because the people that taught them don't have any natural or don't have any real input. So a lot of it's just about educating people and getting to know people. I know my dad finally came around because, when I finally convinced him that this wasn't something that I chose, it wasn't anything that was his fault, it wasn't anything that nobody could have done anything. And the only thing that a parent can do wrong is not accept your children. And I made that quite clear to my kids, with the exception they couldn't get tattoos or I take them off the belt sander. But anything else in their life, I was pretty cool with whatever they felt like they needed to do. And that's kind of the conversation I had to have with my father, is like, Dad, this is not something I would choose to do under any circumstance. It is not something I would wish on anybody that I despise, because it's just not a pleasant thing to go through. And so the whole education thing, the whole having a conversation with people, to step up to them. And, you know, and if you need to get in their face, get in their face a little bit and say, but do it in a way that fosters communication, not alienates people. If you start screaming at people, their first posture is defense, and then they start screaming back at you, and nobody makes any progress. Kind of like politics these days. Nobody actually takes a time to actually have a civil conversation with anybody. And but this is definitely one of the things you need to have a civil conversation with people, because there are a lot of people that just don't get it, and it's not because they don't want to get it. It's just not in their experiential level. And so breaking through that is fundamental to help people understand the LGBT community and the people within it, as far as I'm concerned. Take it next one.
I'm just kind of looking right back at this question again. I just want to make sure I'm going to say what I'm going to say correctly. Well, I mean, I touched on it. My parents were, you know, certainly the most disapproving people when I came out, and overcoming that it took several years. Again, I'm kind of still in the process of it. I really can't emphasize enough how important it is to have people around you that support you. As far as my mom goes, my mom is probably the best example to give here, because she's the one that has improved the most. I was actually able to enlist kind of the help of my grandmother, and she was, both her parents actually were very accepting, and which is, you know, kind of, I think a little unusual. Usually it's kind of the other way around. But I was able to get them to help me help her understand, you know, the implications and the fact that there was really nothing that my mom or anyone was really able to do. There's no one out there that can change who you are. That you are who you are. And my grandma, I think, was instrumental in helping my mom see that. You know, she was the one that was kind of having those conversations with my mom. Like, this is something that, you know, before I go, I want you to resolve. I want you to, you know, understand that if you don't love your son, if you don't accept him, you're not going to have him. And I think that got to my mom. My dad's a bit of a harder story, and it's probably the person I would answer this question with. And I think one of the failures that I've had in regards to him is that I haven't been defending myself with him as much as I should. Whereas we don't really have those conversations. We haven't talked about it in years. Like, there's just this silent signs of acceptance, but there isn't dialogue there. And I think that is something that I should change, and I wish I had done sooner.
Yeah, I think my answer to this question is pretty similar to Joe's, in which the most disapproving people who I think I knew personally were my parents. And they still are the people who, I guess, struggle the most to accept it right now. It takes a lot of time. It takes years. I've definitely been bullied in school because of it. People called me some really mean names. I ended up isolating a lot, but I think because I didn't know those people personally, it was more just like, I don't know, what's your damage? Like, leave me alone. Society already sucks. I'm not stressing over it too much now.
Thank you all for sharing. We're going to continue with more questions from the spreadsheet. Some of these were directed to certain panelists based on their background, their identity, and their experiences. But even though it may be directed for a panelist, anyone can feel free to answer it. Don't feel restricted. The next one is going to be for Gina. It's no mystery that the LGBT plus community is often the target of violence. What are ways that LGBT plus members can protect themselves and their community from those who may wish them harm?
Well, let me tell you what one of the big pushes I've made. Like I said, I'm a firearms instructor and a bunch of other things. And after the Pulse nightmare, I call it the Pulse massacre, I took it upon myself and a lot of other people to get people involved in training LGBT people and women to be able to protect themselves in traditional and non-traditional ways, both with firearms training and with non, hand-to-hand kind of training. That was one of my biggest inputs. I've also been very very adamant in teaching people about situational awareness and just the whole being responsible for yourself. If you see a lot of the weird things that are going on in the world right now, people are not taking responsibility for what's going on, and they're saying the people that we think should be responsible can't respond. So it kind of makes it an issue. I personally have been, believe it or not, I'm 6'1", 250 pounds, and two little boys in New Hampshire decided they wanted to rape me one night. It did not go well for them, period. It's pretty much endemic that if you're not careful, if you don't, and I was doing something completely stupid that night. I was in some place that I should not have been under any circumstances. And because I was alone, it was dark, it was all those wrong things. And so that's kind of been the impetus of what I've been doing to try to help people become more aware of their surroundings, become more definitive in how they react, and to be prepared for things. Standing around and letting yourself get the daylights beat out of you, or getting yourself tied to a barbed wire fence in the middle of nowhere, and be called Matthew Shepard is not something that was actually probably the first thing that got me started in helping people in the community protect themselves. I think there's a long way to go. There's a lot of people that don't feel comfortable out in the world. They don't feel comfortable being around the world. I mean, this is not a safe world. I mean, and it's not a safe world for really anybody right now. But if you stand out of the crowd, if you try not to, if you try to make a point that I'm different than the rest of the world, you become a focal point. So one of the best things that I find and I teach people is, lose the pink hair and just try to blend into society a little bit more. It's maybe not being authentic to who you feel you are, but sometimes you need to trade a little authenticism off for safety. So anyways, that kind of been my put, and I'm been very successful at it. I've trained about 1,000 people in how to protect themselves. I've helped a bunch of them get licenses to carry the tools that they feel that they need to be more equal. A lot of our community are small, framed, and people that are very easy to be victim, very easy. And unfortunately, our LGBT community goes way out of their way to make people feel like they're victims of society. And I don't agree with that. I think that people need to reach out and stand up for themselves a little bit more.
I have a follow-up question to that, actually, Gina, if you don't mind. So in society, what kind of change, structurally or otherwise, would you like to see to prevent this violence from happening in the first place?
Well, first of all, parents need to start taking a little bit more authority of making sure their kids grow up without the idea of, forcing their will on others. I really, I'm very pro-gun. I'm very, very much against the people that say that guns are the problem. I'm more into the environment that people are the problem, and guns happen to be a tool that they choose. But I've seen way more people get killed or beat up with a baseball bat than I have a gun. So in society in general, we need to take more responsibility for how we're teaching people and how we're having people interact in society. And it's interesting because I just got put on the I'm actually on the San Diego County Leon L. Williams Human Relations Commission. And, a lot of that's about, ethnic diversity and ethnic and a lot of sexuality, trying to figure out the whole social justice reform thing. I'm taking a little bit more of a conservative view on it than some of the other people are, but it's a challenge, and a lot of it is that we have completely dropped mental health. You know, we don't treat people with mental health issues like we used to. We, you know, let them out on the street and say, hey, go do your thing, you know, and we'll arrest you when you do something stupid, and then we'll let you out again. So we don't tend to hold people responsible for their actions anymore like we used to. And you know, my kids knew that if they did something really stupid, they very well could end up in jail, because I wasn't going to keep them out of it if they, you know, did something to hurt another human being. And I'm in a position in my life that whatever, if I see somebody being what I consider unjustly treated, I will intercede. And because I don't have anybody that relies on me for my income anymore. My family is all self-supporting and things like that. And we need more people that are good people that are willing to step in and get in the way too. So, and I'm not necessarily saying that they need to step in and shoot somebody. I'm necessarily saying that people just need to be able to step in and make a difference in the world. Did that answer your question, Joe?
Yeah, great.
Thank you. Let's move on to our next question from Bonker.
So the next question is for Joe. So Joe, I know you mentioned that your parents are conservative, and I'm just by knowing you that they're pretty religious as well. So I'm just curious how you balance your self-acceptance with what I guess your parents' religion puts forward regarding homosexuality.
Well, when I came out, it was not just coming out as gay. It was coming out of this couple of different things. You know, I identified more with liberal politics, and I'm not. I would consider myself to be spiritual, but not religious. You know, I believe that there is something. I'm still trying to figure out what that is, and I've kind of had my own journey with that. But my parents have, my dad's trying to, force a particular brand of conservatism and religiosity that's not me, and I've had to accept that I needed to be my full self and accept the entirety of me, and with that came not just my sexuality, but my religious views and my political views as well. And that was pretty much all that was none of what my parents wanted me to be. So it was doubly hard, to come out, because it was not just coming out as gay. It was going against those structural things that my parents believed that were pushing against my sexuality as well.
Mm-hmm. Did you follow up to you have people who were in that community who accepted you?
Well, I mean, there were some people that surprised me. My dad's parents, or my dad's mom, I should say. She was accepting, and I she was similarly religious, so I found that pretty surprising. My family's never really been too involved in church, so there was not really a church to come out to. But I've had friends that were similarly religious, and they were also supportive. I think there is a sort of generational divide there too, where there's younger religious people are more willing to accept me and different sexualities and identities.
Thank you. Let's go to the next question for Jay. Jay, you did describe yourself as gray asexual and gray aromantic. Can you elaborate and explain that?
Yeah, I can take a stab at it. So, people who are aromantic, basically, like as it suggests, don't really experience romantic attraction. And likewise, people who are asexual don't really experience that sexual desire. Um, I land on the spectrum of that, so I don't think I'm totally asexual. I don't think I'm totally aromantic. I can definitely be happy in a committed relationship. But I'm gray in the sense that I don't believe I'm allosexual, and I don't believe um, I definitely don't experience attraction the way that I believe most people do. I never developed a celebrity crush when I was in school. I never developed a crush on my classmates. That was really, for a while, that was very isolating to me. Um, I'm like, I don't know. It's definitely a spectrum. It's kind of hard to explain. Um, but yeah, there are people who are like quasi-romantic, where they kind of experience romantic attraction. There are people who are ace and they are sex repulsed. There are aces who are not sex repulsed. There are a lot of different people who fall on the ace aro spectrum. Um, and for me, it's comfortable. For a while, I identified as demi-romantic or demisexual because the implication is that if you have an emotional connection to someone, that's when you can experience the attraction or like sexual desire and stuff. But gray feels more comfortable to me just because it feels like demi is not quite accurate. Um, I'm still in the process of figuring it out. I think it's okay to not know what exactly I am right now. I have the rest of my life. But yeah, that's the best answer I can give right now.
For Jay, if you don't mind, I have a follow-up question for that. What are like the kind of range of responses you get when you tell someone you're gray asexual and gray aromatic? Because I can imagine that most people, including me, are not as educated about what that means. And how do you wish those conversations go? Like how do you want to kind of have those kind of conversations with people if, you know, once you've explained it and they're still confused, what do you hope they kind of take away from it?
If I'm being real with you, I try not to come out about being aro ace because it's usually not relevant. Only the people, generally speaking, only the people I'm really close to know about it. I think that aro ace people tend to be kind of demonized in media, and also just like the popular human dream is to have children and get married and all that stuff. And it's like, I want to live in a cozy house in the middle of nowhere and raise some dogs or something. As for how I wish the conversations would go, I think it's more just a matter of like, even if you can't be totally understanding or accepting, I wish like people would at least be tolerant of it, or don't try to like force your dreams on me, because they really don't resonate with me. I'm not interested in having children. I'm not interested in a committed relationship if I'm not ready for it. And I don't, it's hard because there's a part of me that's like, it's not my responsibility to educate people, but I also want more people to understand and to know about it. So it kind of depends on how much energy I have, I guess. If I have the energy to spare, then I do want to raise awareness for it. But when I'm tired, I just want to exist as myself and not be punished for it, because it's not like it's something that I have control over. It's just what I am.
Great, thanks for sharing. So Vanessa, are we continuing with the questions here, or are we going to move into the live Q&A?
Yeah, let's continue because some of these were sent in and I want to address them. We just have about three more. And hopefully these will help answer the questions and the curiosity that you already have like in your head.
So I can go ahead and introduce the next question over here. So this was submitted. So the question was, I believe it's addressed towards Gina. So the question is, in my opinion, Western society treats gender as a shorthand box that someone could be immediately sorted into for greater social utility. I believe that our understanding of gender comes from that sorting process, shaping our experiences of each other. That being said, how do transgender individuals know that they identify with a set of experiences outside their sorted gender category? As a transgender person, I've struggled with this question a lot, and while I've learned to accept my feelings, it still frustrates me that they're difficult to explain.
Well, Matthew, they certainly are difficult to explain. I'm not a great believer in the checkbox approach with people. Yeah, basically when you're born, we look at you and go, yeah, male, yeah, female, or in my case, yeah, a little both. And then they decided they needed to make me male, which was a wrong choice. Right choice one way, wrong choice in another. What occurred to me is that I just didn't, I was looking around at all the other male children going, that's not working for me. And, and I went through a lot of that. Wow, okay, I'll do everything I can to try to fit into this mold because, in the 60s and 70s, it was pretty much, if it doesn't fit the round, the square peg and the round hole would just be hammered a little bit more. And, there's a whole another layer of stigma on top of it. And that's one thing I'm really thrilled about now, that a lot of the stigma has not evaporated, but has been subdued. I like the way that you're phrasing this is it's just it seems that it seems like reading your question is kind of telling me how complicated it is in your head, and you should absolutely feel that way. This is not a simple thing. There's a lot of different factors, and I just wrote a thing that that I'm having a blast in the evangelical community just trying to upset their thoughts of what the norms are, and and actually presenting to them like, wow, see, I'm human. And it's really interesting that if you present yourself in a positive way and you just have a good self-feeling about yourself, stop worrying about what the rest of the world wants you to be checked off as. If you spend the rest of your life being concerned about what everybody else thinks about you, you're not going to take advantage of the life that you get. And whether you believe in the afterlife or not, I'm pretty much convinced that I'm going to have as much fun and enjoy this life as much as I can. And the way that I do that is by being true to myself. And if I try to, I'm really, really bad at fitting in other people's square holes. You want to find creative ways to break rules, make a rule for me, and I guarantee I'll find a way around it. I often have been accused of having a PhD in making shit happen, and most of that is oh, here's the rule. Let's kind of just take a little bit of a circumstantial route to make sure that I don't have to follow anybody's rules. And kind of the whole identity politics thing is kind of the current way to shove people into that some sort of a social norm, and they just don't work for me. I mean, I live in the conservative world, and people had learned to deal with me, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about that. There's another question on there I see for me about conservative politics, and hopefully we'll do it. But Matthew, the biggest thing I can tell you is just be you, and don't let anybody else's checkbox, especially in California, man. If you're not who you want to be, it's not hard to get those checkboxes changed and live the way live the way you need to live up here, and you can make the paperwork match. And so I suggest that highly. It was a huge step for me when I got my name changed, my gender marker changed, and it was like, oh wow, hey, now everything feels correct. And now all I have to do is lose about 70 pounds and I'll be good.
Yeah,
Thank
help?
you. Oh yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to tag in real quick. I definitely agree with what Gina said. Definitely, like it can be very easy to get caught up in what other people think about you, especially when there are people you are living with, when there are people within your friend group, and people who are really important to you. It's easy to want acceptance from them, and it's really hard when gender is definitely like it's not a binary thing. It's more like a spectrum. And I feel like gender is definitely just a set of experiences, but society kind of assigns roles to you as soon as you're born because that's just how society works right now. And I don't think you have to be able to articulate or explain what exactly you're feeling for your feelings to be valid. And I think it's fine just to accept your feelings for what they are.
Thank you. Gina did give a little hint about an upcoming question. We'll just get to it now. This was a question from before on the spreadsheet too, but then someone also PM'd me. They personally messaged me and asked about it as well. So for Gina, what has your experience been as a transgender individual in politics, especially as a conservative woman? Or another way to frame a kind of similar question is, how have your political beliefs and views affected the process of coming out?
In terms of affecting the process for coming out, zero. I mean, I basically just, I've been a conservative Republican my whole life. And in fact, I remember the moment when I was listening to Vice President Herbert Humphrey talking in front of a stage, and I was looking at my parents cheering, going, "Are you sure? Are you kidding?" Anyways, so that it's interesting because my transgender status got me back into politics. So in high school and early in my adult life, I was very involved in politics, but then I got involved in work and family and all those other things and stepped back. And when I helped form a gun rights community group in San Diego. And when I joined that as a transgender woman, the guy said, "Hey, you need to interface with log cabin Republicans for me because you're uniquely suited for that." And so I did, and I got very involved in the San Diego party. I'm actually an elected member of the San Diego Republican Party Central Committee. Interestingly, I was just reelected by the third highest percentage of votes of any of the candidates in San Diego County. So the only two people that beat me were Joel Anderson and Carl DeMaio. So a gay man and a guy that's been a senator were the only two people that beat the transgender woman in the Republican Party. So, and there's probably nobody in San Diego in Republican politics that doesn't know who I am. So, so that's been pretty amazing. I get a lot of raised eyebrows. I get a lot of, "Oh, wow, you don't fit my stereotype. You aren't who I think you should be." And that's the perfect point at which I take the opportunity to address people and start working on those stereotypes. I purposely attend the Tea Party meetings. I purposely attend a lot of the conservative caucus meetings. I do that because, first of all, I have some interesting street creds with my shooting and my firearms training ability, and it gets me in the door and it allows me to have a positive conversation concerning the LGBT community and gives them another view. It's not like everybody, I mean, to be perfectly honest, a lot of conservatives see the LGBT community as a screaming horde because that's what they always see on the news. Yelling at, just not having conversations, but yelling at each other and chanting and trying to talk over others. But so by having that conversation, I'm a great believer that once you know somebody, it's really hard to slam them. I've had a lot of people that were very, very anti-trans before they met me, and now they're like, "Well, wait a minute, Gina's trans." I had a conversation with somebody on my caucus. I represent Marie Waldron's district up in North County, and my caucus leader is a very, very evangelical Christian, super conservative. And I don't agree with everything he has to say, and he doesn't agree with everything I have to say, but we've developed a very, very special relationship in terms of, wow, he listens to me, I listen to him. And I asked him one question one time: 5 years ago, would you have ever believed that you would be having a serious conservative political conversation with a trans woman? And he's like, "Hell, 5 years ago, I didn't even know what a trans woman was." And so that's the kind of interplay that that I like to have. My whole ability within the Republican community has been to challenge their existing views, and a lot of them aren't. I'm going to say out of ignorance. They're not really out of ignorance, just out of lack of knowledge. And it's been a real fun environment for me to work in. And you know, and it's funny because if you look at like the Republican Party, it's pretty. There's a, you know, the executive director of the local party is a gay man married to a guy. About a third of our you know, interns and low-level employees in the party are LGBT. Interesting, our central committee is, we missed by 17 votes, having an L, a B, a G, a B, and a T on the central committee. The B missed by 17 votes in his district. So, you know, and so I think that's kind of telling that the world has changed a lot. And the man that runs the San Diego party, who's a devout Catholic, who was very adamant pro Prop 8, so trying to get rid of the idea of same-sex marriage, is now one of my biggest supporters. And you know, it's just a continual training and educational process. So, does that help?
Actually, you know, there are a lot of like conservative people who are not appreciative of the LGBT community, my parents included. I want to know, like, how do you reconcile you know, kind of being along, like, in the same grouping as people who are like so anti-LGBT and your own identity? I mean, I you know, when I was coming out, I struggled with that too. Was like, at the time I was conservative, and then now I'm like, nah, I can't be conservative because that's not gonna align.
First of all, you'd be genuinely surprised of how many conservative LGBT people there are, because you never hear about them. A lot of them, a lot of the business owners that are actually Republicans won't register as Republicans because they get their businesses destroyed. And my experience with the LGBT community and the left is a whole, you know, with that same conversation you just brought up. It's, how can you possibly, you must be transphobic and homophobic and everything else because you're a Republican. And I'm like, last time I looked in the mirror, I didn't run away screaming. So probably pretty much not afraid of myself. And again, I first of all, like I said, I would love to talk to your parents. It would be a blast. And it might help, you know, might help your case. And I'm serious about that. If you want me to, I'll be happy to. But, you know, and yes, there are some very, very strong feelings in that environment. But as they learn who you are and what you are, and the fact that you're a productive and useful human being, a lot of that melts away, and it you know, it just softens. And you know, I happen to be a close personal friend with Rick Grinnell, the guy that was the you know, ambassador to Germany and the acting director of national intelligence for 3 months. And the environment is not as toxic as people like to make you think it is. Let me put it that way. Do I? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes, I feel I am completely true to my identity because I'm a Republican.
Like that comment from Alex. That would be very useful.
That was Sarah asked me that question.
All right. So that wraps up our core questions, and we'll move into live Q&A, which is questions submitted from the audience. And so the first question is actually from me, for Jay. What are you most afraid about when telling people who you are?
Wow, you're really going for the throat here. That's crazy. Honestly, I don't know. It's really hard to say. I hesitate to call it a fear because it's definitely something that just happens all the time. So I like have gotten to a point at which I don't have the energy to be afraid or upset about it, but definitely like the hardest thing for me right now is correcting people when they misgender me, especially because my voice is feminine, and I'm still female presenting. So telling someone I'm non-binary is like, I mean, you don't look or sound that way, and I mean, do I have to? Like, does it matter? Um, but yeah, I don't think. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard to know. I definitely don't feel so much anxiety when I'm just like talking to strangers because that's me navigating daily life, right? Like I can't afford to tell everyone I'm non-binary. I don't have the energy to try to educate everyone I meet on the street. When I go grocery shopping, I can't tell every cashier that I'm not a girl. But definitely when I'm trying to talk to friends, it's a lot harder, because these are people I've already established a relationship with. How do I defend myself against these people, and like, do I have to cut ties with them? um, like I mentioned earlier, like my best friend was definitely the person who helped me get through like the coming out process the most, and it's still a process that I'm doing right now. um, and I think it's hard to face those fears, but with the right support system and with the right people to do it, um, it becomes a lot more manageable. And there are times when like being afraid of being rejected is is a very valid feeling to have, especially when people do end up rejecting you. Like I had an ex who had broken up with me because I was coming out as non-binary at the time, um, and that shit hurted. But it's something that happens, and it's something that allows you to grow. And I think having the people to support me despite my fears, and having those experiences of like feeling hurt and not knowing what exactly I'm supposed to be or who I am or what makes me happy, I think like that's all the process, part of the process of like growing and better understanding who you are and the people you want to have and the world you want to live in.
Thank you, Jay. That was a really insightful response. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and stop recording for now. We can get more into the live questions because I don't want to put panelists on the spot. They're getting these questions right now. You can feel free to type them in the chat and we'll go ahead and read them out. There were some up there earlier, so we're going to go back up to, I believe, a question from Sarah. If you sent a question and you think that it got missed, like we didn't say it or anything like that, please feel free to just message it again. We might just miss it in the whole bunch that's going on. But a first live question from Sarah is, what advice would you give your younger self in regards to your sexuality and coming out?